Okay, Chair, you can start.
Right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee of the 13th of April. Welcome to members, officers, and to the general public. I myself am County Councillor Ruth Edwards, and I chair the Planning Committee. At the moment, I am in County Hall itself, joined by my Deputy Peter Clark, Councillor Peter Clark, and the opposition spokesman Roger Harris, all in separate rooms. So we're doing it all as best we can. Before we do proceed with the meeting this afternoon, I wish you would all join with me for 1 minute silence in respect to the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh. And this is on behalf of Monmouthshire County Council and especially as ourselves of the Planning Committee. So please abide by the 1 minute silence. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. I didn't think it was sensible really to elaborate about the Duke of Edinburgh, as there's been so much in the papers and so much on the news as it is. So as a planning committee, and we're still remotely learning everything, I have to read this out as well. So I welcome you all to the meeting being held remotely. The meeting has been held in accordance with emergency legislation that enables the Council to hold this meeting remotely alongside the Council's constitution and assures that the Council can continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that this meeting is still being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking directly to the committee. This ensures that there is no unnecessary background noise. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this virtual meeting environment and as applicable now and as are in a traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the meeting to ensure that their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item, to make their request clear in that area, and I will invite you to speak at the relevant point in the meeting. This enables me to call you in at the appropriate time and not to sort of interrupt by just calling out, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning committee. Provided the meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirements to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this meeting is unable to cast their vote due to technical issues. As you know, we do have them, we've had them today. The decision of the committee will remain valid. Are there any apologies at all for the meeting today, Richard?
No apologies received, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Richard. So we can now proceed with, as normal as possible, the meeting of the planning today. So we've had no apologies for absence. Declarations of interest, please, from members. None whatsoever. Right, thank you very much indeed. I'd like somebody to move, as I ask as usual, for the accuracy to confirm the minutes of the last meeting of the Planning Committee. Anybody wishing to move, unless anybody can raise any inaccuracy in that committee?
Chair, could I, sorry, I haven't got a hand function at the moment. There's just a couple of minor typing amendments on page 5, if I could mention.
Right. You highlight them and Richard will take note then if he's listening in. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to find page 5. Yeah, it's the paragraph, the bullet point that starts, none of the original applicant's estate agent's valuation of 2,000, it should be 200,000 rather than 2,000. And on the last sentence
Oh,
of
I
that,
can see it, thank you. And where was the next one?
it's in the same paragraph. It says if the new buyer gave permission, it should be if the new buyer gained permission.
Right, okay.
There's only a couple of minor amendments, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Do you wish, anyway, now that you're on, to move with those amendments?
I'm happy to move with the amendments.
Right, thank you. Do you have a second for moving the minutes, please? And I will sign them at the end of the meeting.
I'll second that, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor. So as Councillor Murphy has seconded after it was moved by Councillor Brown. Thank you. Now we'll go on to the applications of this afternoon, and the first one is DM/2020/00720, and this is in Chepstow. I believe, Amy, you're presenting it, and I'll ask all officers if they would introduce themselves at the beginning of their application that they're dealing with. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, my name's Amy Longford. I'm the Heritage and Area Applications Manager. So the first application that we have today is DM 2020/00720, and it's for the erection of a two-storey, two-bedroom house in the parking lot of the rear of 11 Bank Street in the centre of Chepstow. So the application is presented to committee due to objections from the authority's highway officer. So 11 Bank Street, as you can see on the map and the aerial photograph there in front of you, is located in the centre of Chepstow within the main shopping area. 11 Bank Street is a listed building fronting onto Bank Square. The building is a three-storey Georgian fronted townhouse with a commercial unit on the ground floor and a residential flat above. The application seeks planning permission for a new build residential unit to the rear of the listed building at the northwestern end of the plot adjacent to the Dell car park. The site is within the development boundary and in the conservation area. The application seeks permission for the demolition of a small timber storage garage and the erection of a detached two-bedroom dwelling. The site is a long, narrow burgage plot adjacent to Rifleman's Way shops to the northeast and an open rear courtyard to the western side. The plot is bounded on all sides by a tall stone wall, and the proposed unit is proposed to sit lengthways in the plot, running parallel with the rear of Mucky Pups and Chepstow Pet Supplies. So the next slide shows the existing arrangement on site. Just come in. So that shows the existing layout on site with the existing Chepstow Pet Supplies and Mucky Pups. So the proposed arrangement on the next slide, here we go, is the dark grey area. And that shows the two-storey and single-storey element of the building that runs parallel with the existing shops. So the next slide shows the elevations and floor plan. This shows a proposed dwelling with a ground floor bedroom, bathroom, living and kitchen area, and a first floor bedroom and bathroom. So as we said, the site is within the development boundary, and the principle of residential new build development is acceptable, subject to the normal material considerations. Chepstow Town Centre is a sustainable location for residential development, being in close walking distances to a wide range of public transport and amenities. The principle of development therefore accords with the principles of Planning Policy Wales Edition 11. The site is adjacent to existing mixed-use properties of commercial and residential, and so an additional residential unit is considered to be an appropriate use for this location and would not be incompatible with the existing uses. The site would be within the Chepstow Conservation Area, and so the design and the scale of the proposed unit was carefully considered. So the next slide should show, again, that shows the floor plan, the ground floor plan, the bathroom and bedroom and living kitchen area looking towards the back of the listed building, and then the first floor there with a bathroom, staircase and double bedroom. So the next slides show 3D images of the proposed buildings, which shows the dual height section of the building. The majority of the accommodation is in the single-storey element, and there's a much reduced first floor structure. The original scheme was much larger and was considered to be overtly dominant in the conservation area and out of scale with the existing properties. However, the applicants have addressed these concerns and reduced the scale of the building to a more acceptable level. So these 3D, the first, sorry, if we just go back to one, sorry, my fault. The first 3D view shows the view looking towards the new build from the car park, with the bell chambers in the background as the 3-storey building in the background, which is set much further back into the plot facing onto Bank Street. The next slide shows the same elevation but looking from the rear of Bank Street up towards the back of the car park. And then the third shows the rear of the building in context with the existing storey shops along Rifleman's Way. And the last 2 3D images show the internal gable elevations of the proposed dwellings, as it will be seen from within the site. It is proposed to build the lower portion in facing stonework with rendered first floor elevation, as this complements the existing listed buildings to the rear. In addition, a natural slate roof complements the simple and appropriate palette of materials. The approach has been to incorporate a modern interpretation of a backland mews type development of a relatively small scale to complement the surrounding built environment. So we have some photographs next, which will show the current arrangement on the site and the existing adjacent buildings. You can see the gable end of Chepstow Pet Supplies with the transit van there in front of it. It is the site adjacent to that on your right hand side that we're looking at. I'll flick through a couple of those. So we can see the existing timber garage there that's proposed to be demolished, the tile roof of 11 Bank Street, and Bell Chambers is the 3-storey building that we could see in the 3D views. And again, that would be the entrance to the site. The proposed building is set quite far back into the site, around about where that black car is at present. So as mentioned, the application is presented to committee due to the objections received from the highways officer, which are based on the overall loss of car parking on the site, resulting in pressure being applied for parking elsewhere. However, officers are satisfied that given the sustainable location and the immediately adjacent car park, that the slight loss of one parking space can be offset by existing provision, and that the sustainable location is considered to mitigate against any potential harm. Officers are satisfied that the proposals are in line with the objectives of Planning Policy Wales 11, which considers that parking standards can be relaxed in urban and sustainable locations. In terms of ecology, there has been some late correspondence received from the ecology officer who suggested relevant conditions to ensure compliance with the ecology survey already submitted and further information to secure a biodiversity enhancement on the site. The proposals, as they involve a new residential unit, are also subject to an affordable housing contribution, which is £5,916 and will be secured through the 106 agreement. In terms of phosphates, the application site is outside the phosphate sensitive catchment area and will connect to the mains drains that are served by a water treatment plant with appropriate phosphate stripping facilities. Overall, officers are satisfied that sustainable location and amended design of the building addresses concerns raised by officers, and that the principle and details of the application are acceptable and are recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the officer report and received in late correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Very detailed, and I'm sure people who visit Chepstow will know the area quite well if they're so close to the car park. I believe, Councillor Becker, is this your ward? Is Councillor Becker with us this afternoon?
I don't think he's online, Chair.
Not according to the attendance list, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. So anybody else in the Chepstow area likes to start off the comments on this application? I don't know who would be next to that. Councillor Murphy, would you like to start?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I know this particular site very well. The site isn't my, would certainly not be my choice of location, right next to the public conveniences, but there you are. It is a site which will lend itself to this development. It's only currently used as a dumping ground, and there's a few local businesses stick their cars in there. But principally, I don't think the parking is a problem. Clearly, there's the main car park right next to it, and I can't really see any reason for refusal. So I'd be quite happy to recommend approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy. Anybody else wish to comment?
I got my hand up, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Eason next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know whether our hands are working properly or not. I got concerns. I know this area well, as Councillor Murphy and most other people in the south of the county are aware. I got concerns about the application because it drives a coach and horses through the supplementary planning guidance that we operate on and contravenes most of the policies within that. It doesn't respect, to me, the character of the Grade 2 listed buildings within the Chepstow historical sensitive area and doesn't have regard to the privacy of neighbouring properties. It's actually a backfill site, which is landlocked by a public car park owned by Monmouth County Council. I believe it's out of character with the adjoining properties, which are also located within the Wye Valley A1B, as I said earlier, within the curtilage of a listed building. It will, as Councillor Murphy says, that it'd be overlooked public car park and public toilets. I dispute. I understand where the highways are coming from, and the fact that they say it will displace vehicles from the properties at the moment. I would suggest that it could displace up to 7 vehicles from the existing properties, maybe from the office staff, and 2 each from the 2 flats which are in that property as well. So where would those vehicles go? I think it would constitute overdevelopment on the site, and I am aware that the adjacent plot has got permission for 2 other smaller properties, so it would create a major overdevelopment, I believe. What I am concerned about is, sorry, Chair, turn my phone off. I'll come back to you, Chair, all right?
Right, thank you, Councillor Eason. I'll take comments next from Councillor Giles Howard then, please.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe it was somebody calling Tony to say they've seen him on YouTube. Well, I wasn't going to say anything on this application, so I'm sorry I couldn't help myself. But you know, I agree with where Tony was going with this, and I looked at the application, the details of location. I find it really odd that we should think this is appropriate for a house. There's no sense of place there, as Tony pointed out. It's located between a selection of shops, public loo, a car park. It's backland. There's no discernible streets seen. There's no footway, and I just don't think it constitutes successful placemaking. I just find it so peculiar that we think this is an acceptable form of development. So I'll be brief. That's basically it, but I'm not going to support it for those reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. I wondered if does Councillor Eason want to come back now before I then take Councillor Roger Harris?
Well, yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry about my phone going. I think Councillor Howard has picked up on where I was going. But one other aspect which he didn't mention was that the position it would be in, I believe it would also create a health and safety risk in the case of emergencies, etc. Because how would emergency vehicles get into that place when it's in the back of a car park? Other than that, Councillor Howard mentioned most of the points I was going to make as well. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Councillor Roger Harris next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I can't think of a more sustainable location. If you look at what's there at the moment, how that can enhance anything at all with a gravel strip with a flat falling down the garage at the.
Your sound is very poor, Councillor Harris.
Oh.
Nothing at all.
No. Oh.
That's better. That's better.
Okay. I had a gadget in that obviously wasn't working properly. As I say, I can't think of a more sustainable location. And as I've mentioned, the site is existing at the moment is an eyesore, and how that can possibly enhance any beautiful Grade 2 listed buildings around the area, I can't imagine. once again, we might be losing 1 or 2 parking spaces. But as I keep saying every time, we're just hung up on the fact that we've got to park our cars somewhere at the detriment of actually providing housing for people, affordable housing that is, for people to live in. And if something's got to give, as far as I'm concerned, it's parking places. And that'll always be my my mantra on that one. This is inoffensive building. I can't see it not fitting in. It's infinitely better to have it than what's there at the moment. And if it's not, I'm happy to second it if it's been proposed already. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Louise Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wasn't really intending to speak on this application, but I think there is an issue with regard to car parking, because that's why Highways have put in an objection, because they're concerned that the retail parking spaces will be lost, and Chepstow Town Centre does need all the help it can get in terms of having adequate parking for retail use. It's obvious from the photographs that we've seen in the planning application presentation that there's a number of cars that are parked by the side of where this building is going to go, and so it's not just a question of 1 or 2 spaces being taken. It'll impact quite a number of other cars that are located there around the pet supplies premises. I'm also not particularly, I don't think it's a particularly suitable location, you know, as Councillor Murphy said, close to the public toilets and so forth. So I'm surprised that this is being squeezed into such a slot. That's my view on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, no, I'm sorry, I believe Amy Longford wishes, the planning officer wishes to answer some of those queries. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
I thought it might be helpful if I just answered any more queries, unless there are any more and you want to do it at the end. But it just in relation to Councillor Easton's concerns over the SPG, in terms of overlooking, officers are satisfied that there isn't any overlooking given the different uses, the shops and the heights of those shops and the heights of this building. In addition, there is 28 metres from the back of number 11 Bank Street, the listed building, to the proposed unit. So there's a considerable distance in between the two, and the ground does slope down towards the back of the rear listed building, which gives plenty of breathing space between the back of that and the new build. So in terms of the impact on the listed building, is considered that that is acceptable, and it doesn't have a detrimental impact on the special character of the listed building. In addition, in relation to the impact on the conservation area, in relation to design that's been mentioned, the test is to preserve or enhance. So I think we need to consider the context that the building is in and the materials and the designs of the adjacent properties next to it. It's been designed, as I said, with there's a reduction in the scale and the size of the building and the height. So to bring it in line with more of the other buildings, there is a variation in building heights and scales around there, which is why it's been designed as 2 sections, kind of complement and fit in with this, and has a very simple palette of materials which are found within the conservation area and identified in the conservation area appraisal. So for all of those reasons, officers are very satisfied that the application is acceptable and does comply with the SPG. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Anyone else now wish to comment? Well, no more hands up in the chat box. Amy, anything else you wish to say?
Just in relation to the parking, if
yes,
can add on to that. There isn't at the moment the site is used incidentally for parking. There isn't any formal layout of parking. There is some parking available for the flat above the small commercial unit on the ground floor in 11 Bank Street. as we've mentioned in the report, in the officer's report and in the presentation, there isn't the full quota of parking spaces. However, given the sustainable location and given the fact that we should be encouraging residential uses in town centres, it is literally adjacent to the existing car park, and it's walking distance within to the train station, and with all the other amenities that are available on the doorstep, it is considered that it doesn't necessarily exactly comply with the parking standards, but there are mitigating factors which make it acceptable.
Thank you for that explanation, especially on the parking, Amy, especially as you say, if somebody wants to live and needs a train station somewhere to go to work somewhere else, it would be ideal. Anyway, Councillor Murphy, I believe you moved for approval, is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
And have you a seconder for approval?
Councillor Harris.
I did, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor Harris. So it's been moved for approval. So could I have in the chat bar a vote on approval, please? Is everyone able to vote? Because sometimes we have some members who can't. Everyone happy with that? It's either in the chat bar or on the centre of your screen.
Good afternoon, Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Denzel, Lead Solicitor for the Planning Committee. We've now had 13 responses. I believe that means 2 members haven't been able to vote, but 9 are for approval and 4 against approval, so it's quite clearly passed in any event.
Right, thank you very much for that explanation, Denzel, because sometimes we have to take a verbal vote if somebody is unable to vote at all. Right, thank you. So that is carried. We'll now go to the next application on the agenda, and I believe, Andrew, you're presenting this one, and this is 01076 in Llangibby.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good afternoon, members, and just by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager for Monmouthshire County Council. So this is a full application for the change of use of a Dutch barn to allow for the storage of private motor vehicles. I'd point out at this stage, the application is presented to you today, members, at the request of Llangibby Vawr Community Council. And as you can see on screen, the application site is located along Park Road on very much the western extremity of the village of Llangibby. Just go through the rest of the slides in front of you now. So this is a site plan that shows the position of the existing Dutch barn there. You can see edged in red that sits towards to the south of the group of buildings on site. The next photograph there shows the building. You can see the building along the top of your screen. That is how the building is currently how it currently looks. The building previously was open-sided, but it was renovated approximately a few years ago. But that's how it was previously an open-sided building. I believe there's a photograph as it stands. There we go. So that's each elevation of the building in situ. So the proposal before you today, members, as noted, seeks retrospective planning permission for the use of the Dutch barn for the storage of private motor vehicles. The building itself, as you have seen the drawings there, has a floor area of approximately 264 square metres, with a metal corrugated roof with Yorkshire boarding to the walls. No further external alterations are proposed as part of this current planning application. In terms of principle and our material considerations, the application seeks permission for private use only for the storage of up to 15 vehicles. The previously open-sided Dutch barn has been, as you've seen, enclosed within the last few years. However, aerial photography does clearly show that the original building has been in place since at least 2000. And as noted within the officer's report, this particular use doesn't necessarily sit neatly within one specific policy, but to be clear, the application before us is for a private domestic use. So in terms of the design issues and potential visual impact, as I said, we can consider the building as it is in situ, and whilst it's not used for agricultural purposes, it does retain the appearance of a modern agricultural building, and with no further alterations proposed, officers are satisfied that there is no visual harm caused to the wider rural landscape. Members will have seen in the various correspondence in respect of the application a number of objections, and a number of these relate to commercial use of car sales at the site. This matter has been subject of a planning enforcement case that also included a separate building to the west within the site that was only granted permission in 2017. I'd also note that the company AP68classiccars.co.uk Limited was registered at Clowther Park as a site. However, the company's house website does show that this company was dissolved in September of last year. Therefore, officers are of the view that based on the application before us, that subject to appropriate conditions enabling only personal use, that there is no planning harm caused, and furthermore, no planning grounds to refuse planning permission. So, in conclusion, the application has been very carefully considered by officers and is presented to today members with a recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions in the officer's report, which, as noted, includes that the building can only be used for up to 15 vehicles and for private use only. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that explanation on that application there on the agenda today, Andrew. I believe this is in Councillor Clark's ward, but he wishes to speak later. So is there anybody else who wishes to make comments first of all, please?
Madam Chair, we've got some public speaking on this application.
Right, I'm sorry, Craig, I believe I put that in the other column. Sorry about that. Craig, you go ahead with what you need to present to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Craig, just introduce myself to the audience. I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning here in Monmouthshire County Council. I'll be outlining public speaking on behalf of Llangibby for our Community Council, and then also representations from the applicant in response to those comments as well. So I'll read out the statements put forward from Llangibby for our Community Council. Until recently, the applicant has been using this ban contrary to planning regulations as a base for his motoring trading business, openly advertising it on websites and social media. This activity only stopped after the applicant was served with an enforcement order, one of several enforcement actions taken against this applicant. There has been no suggestion in the past that the applicant is an enthusiast or collector of motor cars. In any case, we would suggest that there is a fine distinction between a private collector of motor cars who buys and sells vehicles to enhance their collection and a commercial trader operating for profit. If the committee is minded to approve this application, and we accept that there appear to be no planning reasons not to, we would respectively urge them to impose tight conditions on the use of this commercial building. We hesitate to call it a barn, as it has never been used for any agricultural purpose. We endorse the conditions suggested by the planning officer in her report, but would be happier with a lower limit on the number of vehicles. So that is the statement presented by Llangibby for our Community Council. If it's okay, Madam Chair, I'll now read out the public speaking from the applicant in response to that.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is the response on behalf of the applicant by their agent, Sullivan Land and Planning. The Community Council appeared to be confusing this with a previous withdrawn application for the cattle shed 2020-00072 to the north, which was the subject of enforcement action against the tenant who traded vehicles from those premises without the authority of the applicant and in contravention of his lease. It should be noted that the Dutch ban, which is the subject of this application, has never been used to trade vehicles, only to store vehicles which are the personal property of the applicant. The applicant is content with the number of vehicles proposed to be stored as part of this application, which was discussed and agreed with the case officer. And that concludes the public speaking, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Craig. And I believe you will do the next application as well. You have something to speak on that one.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Right, thank you. Right, I invite comments now on this application at Cloudy Park with the agricultural building now as a storage of cars.
There's 4 hands up, Chair.
Sorry, I can see them now. I was looking at my paperwork. Right, Councillor Phil Murphy, first of all, then, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I agree with the Community Council. There appears to be no planning reasons to turn this down. I am comforted by the strength of the conditions, though. It quite clearly puts the planning authority in the position where, if there are any breaches, they're far more easily dealt with than under the present arrangements. I think it's a matter of conjecture as to whether any trading is taking place there, but that is something that I'm sure we can keep an eye on. And again, the conditions should make sure that that doesn't happen, or at least is dealt with appropriately should it happen. So on the basis of that, I'd be prepared to support approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Maureen Powell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, Councillor Murphy has said exactly what I was going to say. As long as we can make sure that it's kept an eye on, not just now in the next 6 months or so, but even after that, because sometimes these things are kept in order and then all of a sudden, quietly, it starts to become something else. So as long as we can be assured that it is only for their use and private use, and I would second Councillor Murphy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Giles Howard, next, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Apologies if I consult my notes. I take issue with paragraph 6.4.1 in the report, which says that the refurbishment of the original pole barn wouldn't have required planning permission, as it would have been viewed as repair or maintenance works. And I think the consideration here is section 55 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and the enclosure of the size of the barn, from what I understand, amounts to building operations, particularly since the external appearance of the building has been materially affected. And if you look at the plans we were presented with, which basically poles and a roof, nobody can convince me anything different from that. And so I think some form of application would have been required. And I've looked at a dismissed appeal elsewhere against an enforcement notice which related to the enclosure of open-sided pole barns, but I can't remember where the site was, but the inspector's deliberations lead me to the same conclusion, namely that the works are in excess of that, which would constitute repairs or maintenance. So my concerns are then that the alterations to the barn remain unauthorised. The scope of the application is too narrow and should consider the works to the barn, not just the matter of the storage of the cars, and therefore the consideration of the report is too narrow. And I think, Madam Chair, I'm not happy voting on this. I don't think it would be safe to determine it on what's been presented to us today without further consideration about the scope. I'm not saying that the barn and the use wouldn't be acceptable and that the conditions aren't absolutely fine. It's just a matter of process, and I don't think we've considered the fundamentals of the development and only the use. As Craig and Andy have pointed out, the statement from the applicant's agent about it was a tenant who was trading vehicles on the site from another barn clearly isn't correct, and I may be carriage looking, but I'm not green, and as the company's house records show, the applicant in this case is the same person who's registered as the director of that business. So that to me is nonsense, albeit perhaps that doesn't form a consideration of what's before us. But I think, Chair, we need to go back a step and look at whether or not the works of the barn are acceptable. And so I think I'm going to move that it's deferred to come back to a following meeting on that basis, just be on the safe side. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Howard. Yes, the explanation of an open-sided barn is usually called a Dutch barn, which is solely for very machinery, or you'd have sort of temporary sort of enclosures around it if you've had stock in there. But it is, as you say, a completely different characteristic to what was originally there. Tony Eason next, please. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, from a planning perspective, there doesn't seem to be any real reasons that it should be rejected, although I understand what Councillor Howard is saying. But I come back to the objections of neighbours, where they say that large transport lorries are frequently seen negotiating the steep, narrow lane. Was any evidence produced to our officers that this is the case? Because it suggests to me that if you've got large transport lorries frequently using the lane, it's just a bit more than just storing cars. You can't store cars in one place and move to another place and another place. So did we get any evidence of that frequency of movement? And I noticed that over the last number of years, there's been about 20 applications on this property, which suggests to me that it's quite a fluid situation, and maybe it should be deferred and brought back with further information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Councillor Brown next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd support Councillor Giles' consideration of deferment, because I think what's being implied is that the internal changes within the barn should have been part of a planning application in any event, if I've got the right end of the stick. The other thing is I'm not clear about whether or not there could be a condition to actually ensure that cars are only stored internally and not externally on the site, so that it doesn't have the appearance of a showroom, for example, you know, to distinguish it from commercial and personal private use. And the fact that a company is being dissolved, I don't really think is any particular evidence one way or the other, because you can easily set up new companies if you want to, and you can also operate as a sole trader if you wanted to, if it was a commercial enterprise as opposed to one that is presented as being one for private domestic use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. But I think I dare say that Andrew could give this clarity as to if something has been there for a considerable number of years, as there isn't a lot you can do about it. Anyway, Councillor Alan Davis next, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering whether one of the officers can give us some clarification about the points that Giles has made there, because I'm inclined towards deferment at the moment, but I'd like to have some indication from our officers on the points that have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Would you like to come in there, Craig or Andrew, to give some clarity to the members that obviously need a bit more clarity on what they would make with their decision?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I've just been speaking to colleagues following Councillor Howard's comments with regards to the inspector's decision that's been looked at, and I think, given in light of those comments and those concerns that have been raised, I do think it would be wise for officers to go away and just review these inspectors' decisions. So it might be wise for planning committee members to defer this application to investigate that, to ensure that the application is advertised correctly if it is a situation where that repair work that has been conducted at the barn is actually development. So I do feel, in terms of your head of planning giving you the advice, in terms of, I think it would be wise to defer this and let officers investigate this matter and then bring it back with regards to a definitive answer on this situation with regards to case law. I think one aspect I would mind a bit of clarification on from members today is the appearance of the ban itself. So if there are any changes or alterations that members would be seeking as part of a future discussion, or if there are any pointers for the applicant that could be commented on today for the future application, that would be useful in terms of us bringing the application back at a later date. But I think that would be my advice, Madam Chair, for members today.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll first, I'll bring in Councillor Giles Howard next, and then the ward member, Peter Clark, and see how he feels about it. Councillor Howard first, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Craig. As the point he made at the end there about whether or not it would be acceptable, well, I mean, personally speaking, I think I alluded to that, and it's of an agricultural nature and the sort of building you'd expect to find in that kind of a setting around a cluster of agricultural buildings. So I don't have an issue with that. It's just about the process for me, and I want to make sure it's done properly so that we're not subject to any subsequent challenge. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Peter Clark, would you like to comment? And if it seems to be the majority want to defer it, and as that is what is alluded with the council officer as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm happy for a deferral. Obviously, my community council and my residents in Llangibby are very, very concerned about this site. As Tony alluded, there's been over 20 applications since we have this particular tenant on the site, and we have had a whole string of problems there, and in fact the next application this afternoon is yet another problem on the same site. So yes, I would be pleased to see it deferred, and I'd like to be involved in the conversation that goes on during that deferral as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe Councillor Howard was the one who pushed for to move deferment, and have you got a seconder for deferment to do it all correctly?
I'll second it, yes.
Right, thank you, and I'd like to have a vote in the chat bar, please, so that it will be deferred for a future planning committee. Has everyone been able to vote? Yes, I think so.
I'm sorry, Chair. There seems to be an issue with the poll. I can see that we've had 14 responses, but my screen isn't showing what the responses are. It still says 0 and 0. Is anyone else?
The deferral is 100%.
Yes, it's 100%, Dancel.
Okay, so it's 100% for deferral. So,
right,
yeah.
Thank you all very much indeed for your input into that application, and there will be some more work done on that, and then it'll be followed up to another planning committee. Right, we go at the same residence actually as the next application, and this is for Craig. I believe you have something you need to read out first of all, and then Andrew is presenting it.
Madam Chair, to present the presentation.
Yes, Andrew, you present, Andrew, and then Craig will follow up with what he has to say. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and Craig as well. So yes, as you've noted there, this is on the same site as the previous planning application that was just deferred, and this is also a full application, and this is for the temporary use of a static caravan whilst a barn conversion is currently under construction on site, and this temporary period is for 1 year. And similar to the previous application, the application is before members today at the request of Llangibby Vawr Community Council. So, as you can see on screen, this is within the same site, the same complex of buildings along Park Road. And the next slide will show you there these are the southwestern corner. That is the position there of the existing static caravan that is in situ, and these relate to I haven't got the cursor to show you which were, but it's in relation to barn 3. I'm not sure whether you can actually identify on the labelling. It's the second large grey block up, effectively. Correct. Thank you. But the next slide will show you a photograph of the caravan as it stands, with a decked area that also forms part of this consideration. So, as noted, it's retrospective for the caravan for a period of 1 year, and this be a person associated with the ongoing works at the barn conversion. In terms of our material considerations, I think it's perhaps first worth clarifying the reasons as to why planning permission is required for the temporary siting of the caravan. Part 4 of the General Permitted Development Order does permit the temporary provision of a caravan on or adjoining a site during the construction phase, and this is subject to conditions about it's subsequently removed and land restored. In this instance, as the static caravan is not sited immediately adjacent to the barn conversion that it relates to, it would not qualify as permitted development under Part 4. It's anticipated that the works to barn 3, which you've just been shown on this presentation there, would be completed by early next year. And therefore, one of the conditions proposed is that the use cease, the caravan, decking and all other items be removed on or before the 31st of March 2022. I think at this stage, officers would also like to propose an addition to this condition, which is identified as number 2 in the officer's report, that would include that the static caravan only be used by persons directly involved with the ongoing works to barn 3. So for the sake of clarity, the suggested new condition would read as follows. The use hereby permitted shall cease, and the caravan, decking and other domestic paraphernalia shall be removed from the site on or before 31st of March 2022 and shall not be brought back to the site thereafter. The caravan shall only be occupied by persons directly connected to the ongoing works to barn 3 and no other persons. So in terms of visual impact, the caravan as it's sited is positioned away from barn 3. It is still within the wider group of buildings, and accordingly officers are satisfied that it doesn't appear unacceptably isolated or visually prominent within the wider sensitive landscape. And in addition, given the short lifetime of the siting and the condition to remove it and all associated items, officers are of the view that the application would not cause unacceptable harm to visual amenity. In terms of the objections you'll have seen, members, by third parties, these relate to the persons occupying the caravan to date, and that concern that these have not been in connection with the works to barn 3. But officers review that the amended condition, as advised earlier, does provide sufficient safeguard to ensure that the caravan is only used for the reasons sought. There are not considered to be any grounds to refuse planning permission for the temporary period, and that the proposed condition is sufficient. The application must be determined on the basis of the information before us. Should any future occupancy breach the condition, then officers would of course follow the appropriate enforcement process. Therefore, in conclusion, the application has again been carefully considered, and officers are satisfied that the temporary grant of planning permission for 1 year would accord with all relevant policies within the adopted LDP, and therefore is presented to you members with the recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions and that condition 2 as amended, as discussed earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Now I call Craig back as well to read out your presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is the public speaking for the planning application. So the first statement I'll read out will be from Llangibby Far Community Council and then a response from the applicant. So this is the statement from the Community Council. This is another application which we suspect has emerged as a result of enforcement action. In their objections to this application, residents who live on site have pointed out this static caravan has been used by the applicant as a rental property for the tenant who has no involvement with the building work currently being carried out in converting the barn into a residential property. The caravan was in fact installed on site almost 2 years ago in April 2019. We realise that this is not a material factor in determining this application. However, we mentioned it to reinforce our request that should the committee be minded to approve this application, strict conditions to impose to the extent that this should only be occupied by persons directly connected with the conversion of barn 3 and not for any other purpose. We agree with the time limit for removal of the caravan proposed by the planning officer in her report, but would add that the removal should be on a conclusion of the building work should that occur before the end of March 2022. That concludes the statement from Llangibby Far Community Council. This is the statement from the applicant's agent, Sullivan Land and Planning. In support of the residents' objections, the Community Councils assert that the tenant of the caravan has no involvement in the current conversion of barn 3 into residential property. The applicant wishes to assure the County Council that in applying for the temporary planning permission for the residential caravan, he acknowledges that it will be occupied by a person associated with the building project. The applicant is hopeful that the conversion will be completed in the agreed time frame as agreed with the case officer, subject to no further COVID-related delays. And that concludes the statement from the applicant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Craig. Councillor Clark, do you wish to comment now or leave it till others have commented, please? Councillor Clark?
I'll leave it till the others have commented, please, Chairman.
Right, thank you. That's quite all right. Right, so I now invite comments from anybody else that's a member of the Planning Committee, please. Councillor Easton?
Yeah, just one comment. In terms of retention of the caravan for a period of time, we had an instance some meetings ago where a caravan had been situated in a site and had not been subsequently removed, and eventually became the subject of the development of a permanent property. Are we sure we won't be getting in that situation with this caravan? That application after application to retain it, it then becomes able to have a permanent property put on that site.
I would like ask Andrew to comment on that, but I should think with the conditions that are connected to this application are quite strong, if we are minded to approve what has been presented. Andrew?
Yep, you're exactly right, Chair. With the conditions in place, if that temporary period elapsed and there was a failure to comply with the conditions that it was remained in use, we have the power to serve a breach of conditions notice. So there are measures in place to take formal enforcement action, so that the use couldn't become lawful through the passage of time, which was the case that Councillor Easton has sort of quite rightly quoted there. But with those conditions, and the fact that we've got a monitoring officer that monitors when temporary consents are brought to a conclusion in this day and age, I'd be very satisfied that if for whatever reason that wasn't complied with, we've got the powers and ability to step in to take action to prevent a lawful residential use in its own right occurring on this particular site. So I hope that answers Councillor Easton's concerns.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Thank you very much, Andrew, and I'm sure the general public in the area will also be keeping a close eye on it. Thank you very much. Anybody else? There's no more hands at the moment in the chat bar. Anybody else wish to comment, please? No one. Councillor Clark, then I'll call you and then we can then take a vote on the application.
Yeah, Chairman, I think in practical terms, if we can ensure, and this is the worry, that caravan can be removed in the next 12 months, fine, we have to accept that. But like Tony, I'm concerned as to whether in the next 12 months we find reasons to keep it there any longer. But I have to believe our officers can put strong enough wordings together on the clauses of these applications that it'll ensure that caravan is removed 12 months hence. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you wish to move then, Councillor Clark?
Yes, I'll move, Chairman.
And you move to accept the application?
Application, yeah, with the strong conditions, yes.
Yes, right, thank you. Do you have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Second that, Chair.
Right.
Sorry, Chair, can I just, for the purposes of clarity, and certainly those following this at home, just to confirm that the recommendation is subject to the amended condition as detailed in my presentation, not as per the officer's report, which includes the line about being occupied by persons in conjunction with the works to Barn 3, just so that's completely clear.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Right,
Sure,
thank
Andrew.
you. I'm sure that'll be strongly worded anyway, Andrew. So, and Councillor Murphy, you have seconded?
Yes, Chair.
Right, thank you. Could we have a vote in the chat bar, please? That's all done. Thank you. Denzel, do you wish to announce the result? Denzel? I'm sure everybody was able to vote.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I'm having issues with my chat bar again, and I can see how many have voted, but not whether it's for or against approval. So I'll have to ask somebody else.
Right, it's 100%.
12 for approval, so that's 100%.
Sorry, we have.
Sorry,
just
Chair.
the other one. Thank you. Right, so that has been approved. Thank you very much indeed. We now have to go to the last application of the afternoon, and this is 01258 in Port Merrick. Phil, you'll have to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Thomas. I'm the Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire County Council. I'll be introducing this next application in Brook. I'll just share my screen for the presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, good. Okay. So this is application DM 2020-01258. It's to construct a new detached storage building for offices and staff, facilities and storage at Mountain Brook Lodge off the A48 in Porthmeiric. Members, I think, have been to this site when we looked at the previous change of use in 2017 for the wedding venue facility, which is what the old public house and associated buildings are now used for. So it's a grade 2 listed 17th century former coaching inn. It's recently undergone renovation to include a new function room at the rear, which is that building here, and it's reopened as a wedding stroke functions venue. And so there's the old forge next to it, a pan-tile roof. That's the main 3-story element. And there's a storage container here, which is a subject to replacement by this new proposed outbuilding. The car park wraps around the back and the side of the building, and the access is in here off the A48. So the main element, as I've said, is a 3-story building, and attached to the main building is the old forge, which is a stone 17th century barn that's now licensed to host civil ceremonies, partnerships and blessings for up to 100 guests. And to the rear of the property is the recently built extension, that large building at the back there, which is used for dining and events. And to the eastern side of the main building is an enclosed service yard at the front. Within this stands a modern metal storage container that has a footprint of 22 square meters, which I'll show you photographs of in a moment. That's a storage container in there. So, and you can see the parking around the back of the building here. That's a green space in front of the building, if you're wondering what that is. So that's the proposed site plan, and that's where the outbuilding would go in the corner there. So that would be a new 2-story outbuilding used for ancillary storage and office space. The building has been designed to reflect the forge building in a sense on site, and would be 10 meters long with a low eaves height of 3.5 meters and a ridge height of 6.6 meters. The storage building will be finished in vertical timber cladding with pan tiles on the roof. The pan tiles would match the old forge building over here, which is lower than the main coaching inn. We gable fronted to the A48 following negotiation with officers. I'll show you a drawing of the original proposal that was brought in that looked too much to us like a separate house with its long elevation facing the road. We feel this fits in better and integrates itself better with the actual setting of the listed building. So in terms of the principle of development, the new building would replace that metal container. I've got some photographs actually later on which I'll show you. I'll come back to the actual car park layouts in a moment. So that's the proposed elevations. The right-hand one, the north elevation, is what would be seen directly in front from the A48. The south elevation is from the car park, so it's perhaps less public. And then these are some internal elevations. That's the one that would face into the towards the gable end of the inn, and would be the obviously the most usable part elevation. That was the previous elevation of the building that is being superseded. You can see it looked rather like a little cottage. We felt that was too domestic looking. We wanted something that was more honest and functional, and would look and serve as an outbuilding to the main inn, old coaching inn. So we've reorientated it and under negotiation and made it more simple in detail, got rid of the dormers, etc. It's now lower as well, lower eaves. And that's the floor plans. So it's primarily storage for a lot of the tables, chairs, props, floor arches that you need for the wedding venue and events venue. There's insufficient storage capacity present within the metal container. Many of the props have to be stored outside, which doesn't create a great appearance either. So the building will also offer a staff, an office room, sort of welfare facilities, and somewhere for the staff to relax when not on duty. There'll also be a place for the bands to change, get changed when, and at the moment they have to get changed in the loos inside, which isn't ideal in the main facility. That's the existing storage container right near the A48, the other side of the wall, and that's the compound that's been put in, and that's the front where additional parking is proposed off an existing drop curb. And that's the green space in front of the container. So if I just go back to the layout plan, and I'll continue my presentation. So I'll leave it on the next slide. There we go. So the key issues relate to the design of the outbuilding, its impact on the setting of the listed building, as well as parking provision, given there was some parking originally in the area where the storage container has been placed. And that's an issue that concerns Mathen Community Council, the parking. In terms of design and visual impact, the outbuilding has been carefully designed to be viewed as an ancillary element to the main building and as secondary materials to its walls, i.e. vertical timber boarding to reflect this. The pan-tile roof would help integrate it with the old forge building as part of the grouping on the site. The smaller scale and more peripheral position of the outbuilding to the east would help it read as a secondary element that would be a visual improvement on the metal storage container that it replaces, enhancing the setting of the listed building. The proposed building will be seen from the A48, but would have its narrow gable end facing the road. The building will contribute to a sense of place and contribute in a positive way to the street scene. The proposal therefore accords with the objectives of policy DES1 of the LDP. In terms of parking, adding to that, it seeks to ensure high quality sustainable design policy DS1 that respects the local character, and in this case, the historic environment too. In terms of parking, at present, there are 26 spaces in the rear car park to the rear, although the original planning permission for the wedding venue showed around 32 parking spaces, which I'll show in a moment, that layout there, if you can see that. Because the service area was not shown on the plans at the front where the container is. The new building itself will result in the loss of 4 parking spaces, but 4 new staff parking spaces will be provided alongside it, which obviously can be managed by the facility, so the tandem parking shouldn't be an issue. They can manage that amongst themselves. And in addition, 4 spaces could be provided off the frontage, and I know the Community Council have expressed concerns about potential movements in and off the A48 onto those spaces. There is a drop curb there, so that is an existing access that could be used today. So I don't think we've got too many arguments with that, but I take the point that access isn't ideal directly off the A48, into those spaces, but it's an option for the facility to use those. The proposed site plan indicates that following implementation of the proposed works, there will be a total of 33 parking spaces within the site, including the 4 at the front. So 1 net gain above what was originally approved in 2017 for the wedding venue. The applicants maintain that they can cater for a maximum of 100 guests at any one time, and that car parking has not been an issue for them to date, there being an occasional need to use an adjoining field that they rent from a local landowner for overspill parking, but this is managed responsibly. With a wedding venue, they argue that many guests tend to car share to arrive, and many either depart in the same manner or depart by taxi or minibus. Officers are satisfied that the 33 spaces proposed are sufficient for a venue of this scale and have no objection to the proposal on the basis that it will not result in the loss of any on-site parking, and that the vehicle movements and parking associated with the proposed storage building can be accommodated within the existing parking area. The application in our view, accords with the objectives of policy MV1 of the LDP with regards to access and parking. Further issue I wasn't aware of is that to the east there's a house here. The actual people who run the wedding venue actually rent that property, so that the parking that they would have had within this facility is accommodated within the curtilage of this property. So that frees up some more spaces for use by visitors and or staff. So to conclude, the proposal has been sensitively designed and would enhance the setting of the listed building, would not lead to an overall loss of parking on site, and would provide a valuable facility to provide ancillary storage and staff welfare facilities for this existing business. So we'd recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. As it's an ancillary building and you are saying for staff use and so on, I know we can't always say what's going to be internally, but I should think that's quite important as to the use of this building. And surely there should be some sort of toilet or washing facilities in there if people are using that as restrooms or for people changing, but it didn't show anything like that on the internal plan.
Yeah, sorry if I could just answer that, Chair. There's a shower facility in the top floor.
I couldn't read that. I could.
Yeah, it's a bit small, I'm afraid. Can you see that?
I thought it was store and not actual washing facilities. Thank you for that, Phil.
Okay,
that is a big help. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Brown, you're the ward member and you've got your hand up first, so I'll take comments from you first, please.
Yes, thank you. This application, it was amended from a previous one, and it has improved the look of the property in relation to the Grade 2 listed building. But the concern I do have, and it's reiterated by the Community Council, is about car parking, because the area in front of the property is it joins the pavement area, and effectively the tarmac, there's no distinction with the tarmac and the other area, and basically it means that the only way that vehicles can get on and off this area is by reversing out onto the A48. Now, if you come down Pulmerick Hill, you can't see anything because of the blind corner. We didn't get a picture of actually coming down the hill, but because of the blind corner, you'd be actually on top of a vehicle before you knew it. And even yesterday there was an accident on the Pulmerick Hill, and you know, it was involving somebody being cut out of a vehicle, I understand, from the local account. So I don't think that in any way this space at the front, it looks better from that way, but when you're actually coming down the hill, you can't see anything from a visual point of view except the sign that says the wedding venue that's just there. And this bit, as you can see, the tarmac joins in, and people are used to just using this as a pavement, so vehicles will have to go across a pedestrian area. And in the property that's just 2 doors down in this photograph, the highways said that they wanted to ensure that people could come out in forward gear. I think the other thing is that obviously the existing plans, the parking is very similar to that was granted in 2017, because the comparison has been with 26 spaces, but in the previous plan there were 32 spaces for the wedding venue, because of the fact that the service area where if you can see where the grey storage area is, has been fenced off. Now that was part of the car parking area originally, and the temporary storage wasn't, it was just for the building, and it wasn't given any planning permission, and neither was there any planning permission for a fence across there. So that means that if you go back to the original consent that was granted, the argument is that the temporary storage area will be removed, and effectively this new building will replace it. But this will actually lose 4 parking spaces anyway, and the 4 spaces at the front really aren't safe to be used, and I would fear accidents would be caused by people going in and out of there. The other thing is that added to the parking issues are the fact that in the original consent this was about a wedding venue, but also, if you have a look on the Mountain House Brook website, you'll see that it now has a 6-bedded accommodation, and I'm not sure whether or not, and perhaps officers can advise whether or not planning consent would be needed for that, because there's been a kitchen area at the front, and also there's been effectively bedrooms that have been renovated, and it says it's 6-bedded, which basically can have 12 to 14 occupants, and that obviously adds on to the parking issues. There is a very narrow road by the side of this building where no parking could take place, and then the A48 itself, you couldn't park on it. Now obviously there is this idea of hiring the adjacent field, but in muddy and wintry conditions this wouldn't be possible, and we have had instances where there's been funerals, and where the parking has taken place is basically when you turn into the main road of Mathern, and on one or two occasions this has been close to the junction, causing a traffic hazard of actually going into the Mathern village, because you can't get off the A48. So I think that going back to the previous application, I'm not sure whether or not
I think we have to deal with this application, Councillor, not the previous application.
No, I'm saying in terms of the internal alterations on the 6-bedded accommodation, I don't know whether that needed its own planning consent. The other question is in view of the fact the parking issues within the area, having this extra building that's caused a storage building but still looks like externally like a dwelling house, would that create additional parking problems? And I think really the question that has been raised by the community council is whether or not it's overdevelopment. Now if the planning committee doesn't consider that the case, then I think that there needs to be some very strong conditions added to for example, the report states that the storage building is ancillary for business use, but it needs to have a condition to state that and make sure it's non-residential and not sold as a separate plot, as it does not work on a residential basis in an ex-pub car park. A condition that the fence is removed to ensure all the area is available, which is currently referred to as a service area. The hours of business no later than midnight, as it narrows the gap between Mountain House Lodge and the nearby house, and even though it's rented currently by the owners, it could be in different occupation. And the other very important condition is that no parking at all should be allowed at the front of the building in the interests of highway and pedestrian safety, because of the fact that there is this. I would be very, very concerned about public safety if parking was allowed at the front. And I think the 5th condition that I would suggest would be an approved travel plan for staff and visitors for parking, including when accommodation is used inclusively or independently, because there is this 6-bedded accommodation that is now within the main building, which basically can be used independently of a wedding if the owners wish to do so. So I think that I would like the committee to consider whether or not they consider it overdevelopment with all of the parking issues concerned, and also if not to consider the extra conditions. I mean, particularly the one about highway safety. As I say, there was it's known as an accident black spot. Even the field that was is hired, it's got a bus shelter in front of it that was knocked down and had to be put back. And I don't think the photos really show what it would be like if you were actually driving down Pulmeric Hill, and I do have some serious concerns about that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you,
and
Councillor.
I would like to speak again if I can before the vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think I'll bring in Phil Thomas now to see if you want to, Phil, address any of the concerns of the local member. But personally, the 4 spaces on the side of the road, I know several as you go through Wales actually that are very similar, which have got no alternative but to park very much in a very similar position. But I'd like, Phil, if you could, to try and explain some of the reasonings behind Councillor Brown's concerns. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I made a note of the concerns and the conditions that Councillor Brown was suggesting if members are minded to approve. Yeah, in terms of the parking, it's entirely at the members' gift. If they're not satisfied with the parking at the front, which is an existing access and could be used today, is acceptable. They can condition that it's not used. In terms of it being conditioned to be ancillary, we can beef that condition up if need be and not used for living accommodation, but it will be used in conjunction with the premises. So, but we can look at beefing that condition up as Councillor Brown suggested, and certainly getting the fence removed seems to be a sensible option. Although looking at the plan, if I can just show you the layout plan, the fence isn't there. You wouldn't be able to get the parking in for the actual proposed scheme. So we could enforce that the approved layout is actually, as long as we've got a condition saying that the development should be carried out in accordance with the approved plans, we could enforce that layout is actually carried out. So the fence won't exist then. It will be taken down, obviously, to accommodate the new building and the parking, rearranged parking in that area. In terms of times, well, unless there's a time on the wedding venue, a time condition, which I haven't checked, I'm afraid, in the 2017 permission, I don't think you're going to condition that in isolation. You can't condition the wedding venue again if we haven't conditioned it before, because they're only applying for the outbuilding. So I don't see that we could actually condition there's an hours condition just on that building rather than the wedding venue itself. That wouldn't make any sense to me at all. The parking at the front, I've already said we could control that if members don't want it to happen. I mean, from an officer point of view, we're happy with 29 spaces across the site, regardless of the 33 spaces. It's only a few short of what was already approved for the wedding venue, and this is an enhanced facility for the actual staff in the building. So I don't think we'd have any issue with a very small reduction in parking anyway to achieve this positive result as an outcome as well. And then the other one was a travel plan. Possibly, but again, we're only approving an outbuilding rather than the wedding venue itself, which has already got permission. So I'm not sure we're actually addressing the key issue of the wedding venue itself rather than an outbuilding, to be honest with you, which is very much an ancillary element. Yeah, so agree. We should be able to narrow the use of that down to tie it in more closely with the actual building itself.
Right, thank you, Phil. Councillor Eason, you have your hand in the chat bar, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Phil. I think that looking at the plan application as it stands, car parking has been drawn into it just to enhance what the applicant wants. But I do have reservations about the 4 parking spaces they'd like to have on the front of the property. It's a very dangerous spot. Highways don't make any comment about that on their representation. They say no objection. It is used as a parking spot. I don't think we as a planning committee or as an authority should actively suggest that it be used for parking. It is used informally, and I don't think we'll stop people parking it informally. But for us to agree for it to be a formal parking spot, I think would be remiss of us, because it's a very dangerous road. Because a family member of mine had a serious accident there some years ago because of the blind spot that's there. As regards the rest of it, I don't have a problem, but I would like to see something firm said about the front of the property from Highways. There's not to be encouraged for parking, although you can't stop people parking there informally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Easton. Councillor Murphy next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I don't think they need the front parking spaces, but as Phil Thomas said, you could park there now, and Tony Easton agreed that it is used informally for parking. Phil, can you go to that shot of the two cars coming down the road across the front of the?
Yep, will do, Phil.
Yeah, that's the one. You can see there that there is plenty of sightline. It is obscured by that sign. If that sign was moved by that little stub wall, just move it back to there, then it would still serve its purpose, and it wouldn't obscure any of the cars from the sight of any driver coming down. So I think that one's easily got rid of, and the size of any vehicle there would be easily seen by any vehicle coming down. Plus the fact that with that sign moved back, anybody driving out of there would be able to see vehicles coming. So I think that's just a simple thing: move the sign. The accommodation upstairs, the whole idea of the people who own this place moving into the building next door was to free up that accommodation so that wedding guests and their parties can actually stay overnight prior to the wedding the following day. So that is part of the wedding venue. So I can't see any problems with us conditioning that. And I really don't understand the request to alter the times. We're not dealing, as you said, Phil, with the application for the wedding venue. I think that's totally irrelevant. This is only ancillary and basically for staff and visiting musicians. So I really can't see that's a problem. All in all, I think that this is the best solution to replacing that steel container, which isn't ideal, and I'm quite happy to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I couldn't agree with you more. And anybody who's driving on that main road and there's cars parked there and those that are in or out, if you can't see that or the visibility is that good, then you shouldn't be driving on the road. The sign, as you say, is obscuring visibility slightly to those coming in or out of the front of the building, but could it not be put higher up on higher up of eye level view, perhaps where that container is, which will be replaced? I'm not sure about it, but I think that is the whole issue there, is that sign on the grass verge.
If I can come back in, Chair, I think, as I said, that if it was moved by that stud wall where Phil had his cursor there, you can see two little black spikes coming out of the wall.
Yes, I can see it. Yes, better when those coming out and people on the main road as well for to see one another.
Yeah, it wouldn't obscure anybody's sight at all if it was placed there.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Roger Harris next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Second application today, where it all revolves around parking, with a bit of the conundrum that the actual plan we've got in front of us actually increases the number of parking spaces. So I'm a bit mystified why we're putting so much emphasis on the parking. The other thing that I can't stand from Councillor Brown is that the number of conditions that Councillor Brown wants to put on almost makes it seem to be like a completely new planning application. You know, I like dealing with what's in front of me. And what's in front of me on the picture that I can see now is a horrible grey container to be replaced by a sensible looking building. And all in all, we've got people here trying to make a successful business here, which is what we want in the county, and we seem to be finding as many reasons as possible to make sure that it can't be made successful. So anyway, if it's been moved for approval, I'm happy to second. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. As the mentioning about it being converted into some sort of dwelling, the only access is through the car park anyway. Councillor Alan Davis, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a good.
Thank you. You're mute at the moment, I believe, Councillor Davis.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
That's quite all right now.
I have to agree with the comments some of the other councillors. I think that sign is a real issue in terms of visibility, needs to be moved, obviously. And there has been a very bad accident record on this road, but the actual speed limit on this road has been reduced from 40 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour now, and there are electronic signs to slow people down as well. So personally, I wouldn't want to park in front of that building and reverse back onto the A48, because I do consider that is something you'd only do if you really had to. But I can't see any reason why people park on there now anyway, so I can't see why we would put a condition to stop them doing that. And as far as the application is concerned, I just don't see any issues with it. It's much better than having that container there, as far as I can see, and the parking issues, etc., have been dealt with. So I'm quite happy to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Now the local member, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's been said that vehicles already park here. They don't actually park here because there was some very large flower things that were put there. So they've, in the last, I've lived in the area for 20 years and there's never been any parking here. So that's not the case. And I am very concerned about the safety aspect of it. I think when the officer, and I don't think that the picture that we had there completely, I think the bend actually is shown clearer on that picture that we've got on the screen now, and I've got real concerns about that, particularly as the house that's one door up from, not the next one, but one door up, had conditions about coming out in forward gear because of the busy road concerns. As I say, it's never been parked on, as far as I know, for at least 20 years, and I think it would be dangerous to pedestrians who aren't used to having walking along the road and having cars there. And I think that is my main concern. So I would like a parking condition to say that in the interest of highway and pedestrian safety, that parking shouldn't be allowed there. In terms of the hours of business, there is a condition already at the end of this report about hours of business, and basically it's only on the from memory, it's only on the Monday morning, Sunday night, Monday morning that it goes beyond midnight. And so I would suggest that it's midnight for all of them, because of the fact that there's less of a gap between now, because of that building, between the house next door and the other one, which may not be in either rented or in the same ownership as the Mountain Brook Lodge. And that's really for the residential amenity, so that they get, and it says on the website that it's only up to midnight. And with regard to the fence, the original plan said that there was no fence on it, but the fence was put on it. So I think it would be helpful to have that removed. But the other condition with regard to ancillary business use, I don't think there was any problem from the officer on, including that. So I would like that to be included and beefed up, because it's part and parcel of the report in any event. So I think the conditions that I'm putting on are sensible and are really for highway safety. And as I say, unfortunately, if we'd gone out on a site visit, which we haven't been allowed to do, I think you'd see that that photograph doesn't exactly show how it is, because there is a slope coming down a bit as well. And, you know, added to that, when I was driving down there the other day, I thought I will not be able to see anything coming in and out of here, even at 30, you know, without any warning. And I just think it's dangerous for the people who are parking there. And there definitely isn't any current parking there. So I would like it to be considered with the proposed conditions, please.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Forgive me, but I must be a bit ignorant, but obviously if there's a drop curb there, could you not reverse onto that there for 5 minutes or whatever? I think we're sort of muddying the waters a little bit with that parking on the side of the road, and they have to come out from the lane as well. So I would like some clarity on that, please, Phil.
Yep.
Comment on that, Chair.
So shall I let Anthony go first? Tony, go first.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like just to have some clarity on what the authority highways say about parking in front of the property. I don't think we should encourage it. We probably won't stop it. But if a driver parks there...
That's what I mean. Is it within our realms of actually stopping anybody parking on that piece by the side of the road?
No, we probably can't stop them, but I don't think we should encourage them. I think that if we do acquiesce and agree that they could park there, we are then taking responsibility for saying, well, it's okay to park there. If a driver parks there, they take their own responsibility. I'm not saying you shouldn't park there, it's up to the drivers, but I don't think the authority should say, yeah, that should be a parking area. It may well be, as it is at the moment, an incidental parking area, but I don't think we should approve it.
Fine. Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Shall I just come in there?
Yeah, if you can, please, Phil.
Yeah. Councillor Eason's correct in that I think it's got a drop curb, so it's capable of being used for parking. Whether it has historically or more recent years, maybe it hasn't, because it was maybe the landlord of the old premises put planters there to deter parking, but it was obviously used potentially for some sort of a vehicle access, because they wouldn't have dropped the curbs there otherwise.
Exactly.
So it's capable of being used. If members don't want the land to be formally used, and we wouldn't agree for it to be formally marked out with white lines, so that wouldn't be part of this permission, and we could condition that it's not marked out formally. But I think that's all we could do really if members are minded to approve the application, but without that parking at the front. In terms of the other point made, we can certainly talk to the applicant about the sign being relocated. I'm not entirely sure whether it needs permission, the sign itself. It might do in terms of its dimensions, but we can look at that, and it's sensible really in terms of highway and public safety to get it moved. But obviously if we're not encouraging people to park in front of the building, that becomes less of an issue, but we can certainly get it moved in case people do park there informally. Yeah, and they could well park there ad hoc as they're driving along there, nothing to do with their actual purpose and the building might be just coincidental pulling in for something. Possibly so, yes, yeah.
Right, thank you. Anybody else wish now to comment on the application? I think we shall need some clarity now before I go to the vote, exactly what conditions Councillor Brown wishes to add to this application before we go to this vote. I think this is crucial.
Okay, do you want me to do that, or is Councillor Brown coming back in?
Councillor Brown's coming back in by the look of it.
I don't mind actually. Which would you? I've got 5 conditions here. I think the 5th one is probably less important on the travel plan, but I don't think that would that would probably help the venue in terms of pointing out safe locations for people to park really. But should I go through?
I think that's part and parcel of any sort of venue that holds a wedding. Shall we see what Phil has to say first then, Councillor Brown? See how he's worded your conditions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So yeah, there were 5 you outlined. So the first was to beef up the ancillary element, so that it's used for the purposes that it's got in the actual floor plans, and for no other separate domestic purpose, shall we say? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I think obviously the concern is that if it's used for accommodation like the internal accommodation that's already been developed, then obviously that will add extra parking pressures, and I think that was the reason, but also to make sure that it's tied to the building itself, really.
Okay. It's not used as separate domestic accommodation or residential accommodation.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Then in terms of the fence being removed, well, we could put that in, but I'll let members debate that, because the plans clearly show the fence not being in the proposed layout plan to accommodate the additional parking and the building itself. So I'm not sure we need that condition because it's not on the proposed drawings.
Yeah, I suppose I was just going by the history that the other one wasn't on the proposed drawings and it arrived anyway, so that was the reason for that. But if you think that the plans are okay, that's fair enough.
Chair, the plans don't work with that fence there, so the fence would be gone anyway. I don't think that's an issue.
Exactly.
Okay, and the hours of business, I think there is something at the end of the report, isn't there, on that?
Yes. How did you want that varied?
Well, but basically, I think it was just most of them finished on midnight, but the one that started at 11 o'clock on Sunday went on to past midnight. And I just thought if there was another occupier, because obviously the premises next door is only rented, then it may disturb them if they've got to hear noise after midnight. So I was basically just saying all of it to finish at midnight, because that's what it actually says on the website about it going to midnight anyway.
You do need a bit of leeway for staff to tidy up after the wedding and come back to the building, maybe get changed and go, I suppose. So yeah, they do probably need a bit more flexibility than midnight itself.
I think the other days are just to midnight, and it's just really, you know, in case it would disturb somebody's sleep nearby, if it was at past midnight on a Monday morning.
Well, it's up to members, really. I mean, I think there does need to be flexibility for the staff to. The wedding venue itself shuts, but then obviously staff don't go home immediately. They tidy up, they sort things out, and then they go afterwards, don't they? So I think that's why there's a degree of flexibility needed.
And of course, if you are living or staying or renting near a public venue like that, you can expect to have some sort of disturbance if there's a venue that's having weddings or whatever next door.
Chair, could I raise a point of order on this matter?
Yes, please, Councillor Eason.
I'm rather concerned that the application is constructing a detached storage facility, yet we have now moved into parking areas, hours of opening, where people can live. I think they will be subject to another application for variation of their conditions, surely.
Well, I should imagine that they have got most probably opening hours anyway on their licence.
So why are we discussing this? I understand where Councillor Brown is coming from, but it's not part of this application.
Exactly.
It is. It's a condition at the end. There's already a condition at the end on it. There's already a condition at the end on it, and all I was suggesting was varying that from 12:30 to midnight, which is the same as the other days of the week.
All right. Okay.
Well, our point as officers would be that they do need a degree of flexibility to come in and out of the building, to put things away,
I mean, I'll leave that. So, my main concern really is this condition about no parking at the front, really, for highway and pedestrian safety reasons.
That's important.
Chair, can I come in very?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Murphy next, please.
Their website says midnight anyway. You know, this is just this is just making a mountain out of a molehill here. I think the officers are absolutely right. They need some flexibility. They're advertising that everything closes at 12 o'clock. I don't think we need to impose this. And as Tony Easton said, you know, how much are we going to discuss of this application? We should only be discussing the application before us.
Yes.
Well, I mean, basically, if you feel that, then leave that one out. But as I say, the main condition I'm very concerned about is the highway safety one about no parking at the front.
I fully support that one.
I don't know if we can attach that actually to this if it's there, and it could be a case of who is the actual
Madam
owner
Chair.
of it. And I just don't think that you could, as Phil says, don't put white lines on it. But I don't think we could sort of summon somebody if they quite coincidentally happen to park there.
That's a drop.
Madam Chair, can I come in terms of just trying to simplify? And
Yes, please, Craig.
To try and advise. I think we've had Councillor Murphy and then seconded by Councillor Harris to approve the application. There's been a number of conditions mentioned, so what I suggest is wise for Planning Committee to take a vote based on the conditions outlined in the report, with the two conditions amended. So one condition to remove the informal parking on the front. So we get an amended plan to show that parking is not dedicated and it's just left as existing as informal parking. And then the other condition amendment is to strengthen the auxiliary condition as outlined by Councillor Brown. So this, if I think it'd be wise if members are happy with that to take a vote on those two particular conditions. I think the other conditions have been discussed about, and we had a call to approve the application. So I think it's wise that members make that decision now with those two proposed amended conditions.
Yeah,
so one for the change in the plan to get the dedicated parking taken off the front, as Councillor Brown and Councillor Easton have suggested, and then secondly to strengthen up the auxiliary condition.
Yeah,
I think that's very fair, actually, Craig. And an ancillary building is an ancillary building that's usually tied to the main one anyway. So I think if all members are happy now, it has been moved for approval by Councillor Murphy and also seconded by Councillor Harris, was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I will now go to the vote with those conditions as clarified by Craig. Thank you very much indeed, members. Please go to the vote.
Good afternoon again, Chair. We've had 14 responses now. There are 13 for approval and 1 abstention, so that's quite clearly been approved.
Right, thank you very much for that result, Denzel. That's the end of the applications as such for the afternoon, but we do have number 5 on the agenda, Planning Directorate appeals decisions. Are you going to present those, Phil?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Come back in now.
Chair, I'm going to leave the meeting now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Easton.
Won't be long, Tony.
Chairman, I will as well, please, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Who was that?
Jim Higginson, Madam Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Higginson.
Okay. Yeah, this was an appeal decision for the change of use of an existing holiday let near Star Hill, or at Star Hill, called Cattry Cottage, to a separate residential unit, a single dwelling. I think it was an officer decision. We refused on the basis that the accommodation was too small to actually be converted to a separate domestic dwelling. We felt it would then be likely to be subject to pressure for extensions in the future. You can see it's a tiny property. It's a real old traditional cottage that was literally one up, one down. And we did allow an extension previously to accommodate the hallway and bathroom, which was really on the sort of cusp of what was allowable to protect the character of the building. And it is very, very small. So it just wasn't big enough to be converted to a separate dwelling. And the inspector agreed with us. There wasn't enough storage space as it was, and there would inevitably be pressure on us in the future to seek to extend it and then the problem would be it would actually lose its character. So that was another successful appeal we had, and it was dismissed. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, Phil. Thank you all for your attendance. If nothing else is to discuss, I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much indeed. Keep safe.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank